I know I mentioned it a couple weeks ago, but being the pastor of a church plant makes me filthy rich, as you would imagine. Yeah, thank you for laughing so heartily, Colton. But we all know that's not true. But we saved up, and I got to surprise my wife a couple weeks ago for her birthday with skydiving. And one of the things that was really kind of a funny question that kept on being asked afterwards is the question of, was it worth it? Obviously, the question of would you do it again was another one, and we both agreed, well, probably not. It was not that fun. But was it worth it for us both? We kind of were like, well, yeah, because you got to check it off the bucket list, right? Like, it felt good because you're like, yeah, I mean, like, I got to say I am one of the few people who have jumped out of a perfectly good plane. So, I mean, that's kind of cool. So, yeah, it was kind of pricey, and for that reason, we're both kind of like miserly enough to go, I don't know if we'll do that again, I'd much rather eat a really good meal for that kind of amount of money or something like that. But yeah, it would be a really good meal. But I really like good food. But you know how you've had experiences in life where people have asked you, well, was it worth it? Right? Right? You've had experiences where people are like, well, so was it worth it? And the reason why we ask that is because we're kind of curious about, like, after you've done the thing that was like this big, experience or whatever, like you got to travel to wherever or go, or maybe it's a bad thing, like, was it worth going and dealing with all the crazy over Thanksgiving with the family, or were you better off just skipping it, Was it worth it? We say that with investments, like, hey, you just bought a new car, was it worth it? Sometimes we're asking because we're like, because I was looking at that same car, and I want to know if that is a good investment. So what was it worth it, Or, all kinds of, like, big and small. You went to that school, was it worth it? You decided to go apple picking at that orchard, was it worth it? Brides and grooms can sometimes, like, ask a lot of other brides and grooms, their experiences with, was it worth it getting a nice DJ or not? All kinds of different things, all different investments, because we realize that life is all about trade-offs, right? Life really is. Life is all about trade-offs, and we kind of want to know, and we wonder which ones are the best. Which ones are the best? So, you visited a live church. Was it worth it? I don't know. Metro Diner would have been pretty nice. But you get fed differently here. Amen, amen. Okay, you're being cheesy now, all right? But the reason why we ask this is because we realize that, like, we've all made some bad trade-offs in life. You just have to have. I have to believe that you've made a trade-off where you were like, I thought that would be a nice option, but it wasn't the right one. And we've hopefully all made good trades as well. But today's two parables, because we're in a series that look at the parables that Jesus told about his kingdom, today's two parables are actually going to reveal to us how bad trades and good trades go. Because at the end of the day, there is one trade-off that if you get wrong, it matters more than any other deal you'll make in your life. So the stakes are high because as far as, like, trade-offs go, this is the one that matters more than anything. And so if you have your Bibles, you can turn to Matthew 13, and we're going to read just, I think, 4 verses. But we have it on the screen here as well. And it's two parables. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found, and then he covered it up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. So that's one of the parables right there. That's one of the stories. Now he goes on and he says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who, on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. So that's what we're going to be kind of studying and digging into. It's two stories. They're really simple, right? Like, if you're telling bedtime stories, your kids are still awake, still going, and? There's a lot left unsaid in these things. But what we see here are, and actually, Sam, I'm glad you're here today. I'm not going to call you out, but she's got twins. So you know something about twins. We've got twin parables here. And so, actually, they're not identical twins because one's about treasure buried in a field, and another one is about a pearl. But they're both very similar, which is why Jesus told them right next to each other. Because in the first one, where we begin with treasure, in the second one, we begin with a character who finds a treasure. In the first one, the treasure is stumbled upon, right? He's in a field, and all of a sudden he's like, ooh, money. And then the other one, the merchant goes searching for the treasure. So they're not identical there. The first one, the joy is emphasized. Oh, what a joy it was, and the joy is the reason for it. The second one doesn't mention joy. And the first one, it talks about finding treasure that's been hidden and then hiding it again. And in the second one, there's no mention of, like, hiddenness, except for the fact that he has to, like, search for it, but it's not really hidden. So these parables are just, I'm telling you, they're close, they're similar, there's a little difference in them. But what's what's different about them simply helps to make it worth having two parables instead of one, because you get two angles of one critical reality, which is the finale of both of them. The person goes and sells all that he has so that he can buy the treasure. Right? Yeah. Both of them end the same way. He goes, sells all that he has. One, it says even with joy, sells all that he has. So I'm going to ask you, today we're going to take an offering right now. And with all that you have, I want you to go ahead and liquidate this. We really could use some better lighting in here. Anyway, yeah, no, but like they sells all they has. And who's the one telling this parable or these parables? Jesus. I'm just tracking that you're making sure that we're, okay. Jesus is the one telling the parables. So here's what I want you to realize. Jesus, the one person on earth who knew best about the kingdom of heaven, says it's worth it. That's what I want you to get. The kingdom of heaven is worth it. It's like worth it all. Jesus is trying to go ahead and tell these stories. I just want you to know it's just worth everything. So here's the one thing that I hope we get from today, is that the kingdom of heaven is worth anything on earth. It's simple, but it's simply that. The kingdom of heaven is worth anything on earth. Now, it's interesting to make such a blanket statement because worth is very personal. Think about that for a second. Worth is very personal. What something is worth to one of you is not the same as it's worth to another person. Because some of us, for instance, it is not worth spending all that kind of money on a expensive meal. But as I've already come clean, I will do that. Because life is short and food is good. And so, but here's the thing. I don't know if y'all can see it. And it's just a really nice car I drive out there. Paint peeling and everything. And it's like, for me, I just don't, it's not worth the same as it is to some of you. You like that nice car. And you know what? I like that nice car for you. But it's worth is something so personal. It makes me think of a yard sale that my family had a number of years ago. For some reason, I think I was either living with my parents at the time or visiting. My family was having a yard sale. And so it was like a group effort. All of our stuff was put out there. And I don't remember what it was. I just remember there was something out there that my mom is still in the house, and she's grabbing things, and she's pulling them out. And then as she comes out, at one point, I'm like, Mom, I just sold that one item. And she's like, oh, you did? For how much? And I was like, I think it was like $5, something like that. She was like, $5? That's all you got for it? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I thought like our values were different. What it was worth to her. I mean, she wanted to sell it, but she didn't want to sell it for $5, I found out. I had assessed that wrong, and I got to hear about it. But, like, again, worth is personal to us. Because here's what I would say. How would you like somebody that's not you to come into your house and determine what is worth keeping and what is worth selling, and for how much they're going to sell those things? You're going to get the money, Colton. Come on. Alexa, don't say no too quickly here. You're going to get the money. But they're going to determine what they're going to sell from your stuff and whether or not it was worth keeping. And then they're going to determine how much. Anybody taking that deal? No, I didn't think so. Because worth is personal. So it's a bold thing for Jesus then to look and go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I can tell you what everything in your life is worth. For Jesus to look and go, I can go ahead and evaluate properly everything that you own, everything that fills your schedule, everything that would be a passion of yours. I can determine its worth. Because initially, we kind of in our humanness want to go, actually, I can determine what it's worth, Jesus. Let me just tell you. But it's a statement so bold for Jesus to say that it's the kingdom of heaven is worth anything else you could have. So for Jesus to make that, that's a bold statement that I want us to unpack. It's worth anything else you could have. So let's start with the word worth. If you're a note taker, our first point will be this: getting our assessments right. Because like I said, we're constantly making assessments in our life, determining value. I mean, if you're if you're a recovering person who's late to things, you have to eventually realize that like when you consistently are late to things, you're communicating worth to the people that you're being late to. Yeah, I know it's just, but I'm just saying like there's worth moments all over the place, and the real difficult thing is that sometimes we can get the assessment wrong. I found a story as I was researching and preparing for this sermon today. And back in February of 1986, there was a guy whose name is Roy Wetstein, and he went meandering through a Tucson gem and mineral sale convention in Tucson, as many of us have, right? Whenever we visited Tucson, we went to the gem and mineral sale, and we meandered through it just like Roy Wetstein did back in February of 1986. Well, here's the deal. So he's going around, and he's looking, and he sees one exhibit where they have these very pretty rocks, like these gems and minerals, I suppose, at the gem and mineral sale. And as he's looking at these beautiful ones that are laid out as like, these are the nice ones, they're priced accordingly. They're expensive. And then he gets to this one bin that this amateur rock seller that at this exhibit booth had. Just a bin of like $15 rocks. Kind of grab them if you want, kind of thing like that. This is just a bin you kind of thumb through. So anyway, he's going through that bin, and he's apparently had 2 kids who each gave him $5 and said, hey, go get a rock. So he's got how much? Okay. Abigail's like, $10. Yes, you got it right. This is not a riddle, but I just want to make sure someone... So he's got $10, and he gets to this one rock, and he grabs it, and he decided he wanted to have that rock, because what you need to know about Roy is that he was a Texas gemstone broker. So he's from Texas. He's a gemstone broker. He actually kind of knows this stuff. So he grabs this one rock, looks at the amateur rock seller, and says, $15, I've got 10. Would you take 10 for it? And the guy manning the stand looks and goes, you know what? It's just an ugly agate, which I don't even know what that is, but that's a kind of rock apparently. He's like, it's just an ugly agate. Yeah, $10, you can have it. Yeah, sure. And Roy walked out of there with that, $10 less, but holding that, rock and having a really big smile, because he knew that it was actually a one-of-a-kind 1,509 carat star sapphire. Yeah, which... You're like whistling. You don't even know what that means, but it sounds nice, doesn't it? Well, sure enough, it is. So originally, there were some evaluations that it was going to be worth $2.5 million. In my research, because I don't want to be a pastor who just throws out big things to seem, I snopes this thing. I'm not sure that's a verb, but I looked into it and investigated. And here's what the thing is: most people are saying I don't think 2.5 million was accurate. It was probably in the tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Wow. So yeah, still, I'm not sure. I think I'll take that trade off. The $10 versus, even if it's only a couple tens of thousands of dollars worth, that was definitely a significant find, wasn't it? Yes. And that moment was all because the one guy didn't get the assessment right. The one guy didn't get the assessment right. He's like, yeah, $15 down to 10. It's $10 more for me, not realizing what he had. And Jesus, in his parables here, in his first parable, he tells a story about a guy who sells everything he has for a field. Like everything you own. That seems nuts, doesn't it? Like it doesn't seem realistic and right. Like I'm going to sell everything that I own, all my clothing and everything I own to buy a field. It's like, okay, you did not get the assessment right. Fields aren't that great. Except for if you don't know that he knows something about that field. He knows in that field that there's a treasure that's been buried. That he found it there, he buried it there, and it's worth the exchange. It's kind of like if Roy Wetstein, for some reason in the story, which isn't really the way it went down, but if he only had $10 to his name, it's the last $10 he has in this world. If he bought a rock at a rock show, it would seem crazy. Unless, of course, he knew what he was getting. And then him giving everything that he had for it would not be crazy. It would be the smartest and best thing he could do. Y'all tracking with me? See, the second parable was confusing for me. Parables aren't necessarily meant to be incredibly literal, because honestly, who sells all they have to buy a pretty pearl? Y'all, come on, y'all with me this morning? I know it's a gray and dreary day, but come on, think about it. Here's how things work generally in this world, I found. You get valuable pearls, you come across them, you find them, so that you can sell them, so that you can get all the things that you would otherwise need. So to sell all the things that you would otherwise need in order to get a pearl, you're not going to eat it. It's not going to shelter you at night. You're not going to wear it. I guess you could wear it, but you know what I'm saying? It's not going to actually cover you. And so it doesn't make sense except for the fact, and again, that's why we have to understand when we're reading parables and interpreting them, that we're not supposed to go hyper-literal. This doesn't make sense logically. That's not the point that Jesus is making. Jesus is trying to say, hey, listen, the merchant went looking for something specific, and once he found it, he was like, I'm all in. I'm all in, pushing all the chips to the center of the table. I'm all in. This is what I was looking for, and I found it, so I'm all in. And our lives are filled with us constantly searching for what matters, for what's valuable. It's not a midlife crisis. It's a quarter-life crisis. It's a, 13-year-old crisis. So what's this life meaning? What's it all for? So we're constantly searching for meaning and value and what really is most important. And value is determined largely on what someone is willing to pay for something. Right? So for the kingdom of heaven, now this is where it gets crazy. For the kingdom of heaven to come to earth and to be fulfilled and made available to mankind, Jesus, he shows us what it is worth. What the kingdom of heaven is worth to him. Because I'm not referring to these stories now. I'm talking about Calvary. That Jesus said the kingdom of heaven for mankind to have access to is worth everything that I have. I'd lay down my life for it, Jesus says, so that they can have it. So he paid with his life. It cost him everything. And like I said already, Jesus, the one person on earth who really knew better than anyone else what the value of the kingdom of heaven is, said it's worth it. It's worth everything for me. I'm going all in. I'm not going to hold on to other little things. I'm all in. And I realize that then leads us to number 2, which is seeking and searching and selling. Because everything that we do that's worthwhile spiritually, just so we all know, everything that we do that's worthwhile, anything spiritually, is a response to what God has already done. It's a response. Jesus paid the price and said, hey, I'm all in. I'm going to do all this so that he can make the kingdom available to us. And the question is then, what's our response? One more time in these parables, he says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. And then he forgot about it and he moved on because he had really important things to do in this life. And he got then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who is searching and looking for fine pearls. And then when he finds one of great value, he goes and sells all that he has and buys it. So the second parable, with that searching, makes me think of like what Jesus said in Matthew 6, seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And what he's talking about are all the things that are really tempting to be valuable to us in the moment. Like what we're going to eat, what we're going to wear, where we're going to sleep, what job we're going to take, who we're going to marry, what we're going to do with our life, what it's going to amount to. Should we buy the new car, or should we save up, or, should we get the extra degree, or whatever else. Like he's saying, all these things get added to you when you seek the kingdom first. And that's the thing. It's a matter of first priority. All of this seeking and searching and selling seems to indicate that the kingdom of heaven, whatever that means, and again, we're kind of unraveling that and unpackaging that in all these stories and parables, but whatever it means is the kingdom of heaven is something that can be found, can be sought after, can be invested into. I mean, that's what he's kind of saying, is like this kingdom of heaven is something that's, you go looking for it. And if that's true, that it can be found, it can be sought after, it can be invested into, I wonder, what does that mean for us? What does it mean for us to go ahead and say, you know what? It's probably going to require a little bit of activity on my part. A response to what God's already done, but a little bit of activity on my part. What's it mean to find this kingdom and its king? To seek after this kingdom and its way of operating in this world that prepares us for the next? To invest into that kingdom. See, the first person, it says, found it a joyful thing to go ahead and do. Right? Yeah, it was a joy to buy a field that was buried with treasure in it. It wasn't a drudgery. It was a joy because he knew it was more than worth any sacrifice he was making. Oh, dude, you just liquidated your bank account to go buy that field? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. You just wait. See, Jesus is trying to say the kingdom has come, and it's here already, and yet it's still coming. There's still more to come. And he's going, now here's the thing. Are you going to realize that, and are you going to seek it firstly? Wow. Is it going to be a top priority for you? And honestly, if that's what Jesus is asking, what does that look like in your life, in my life? To really evaluate the kingdom of heaven as like, this is a first priority. Are we searching for it? Are we looking around and going, Jesus, help me to see your kingdom in the midst of a crazy Fredericksburg region? As I work in the DMV and as I'm working with whatever your job entails you working with, or whatever your life and its day-to-day rhythms entail, God, help me to see your kingdom come as I'm a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad. God, help me to see your kingdom come as I'm working in this classroom, as I'm working in this office, as I'm a retired person trying to figure out what it looks like to live retirement to the best of my abilities. What does it look like to seek the kingdom first? Because I'll tell you this, friends, for me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, it is so easy just to kind of get distracted. To seek the kingdom, oh yeah. But like not seek the kingdom firstly. And to know that Jesus even invites us to go, and we're going to get into this in just a second, are we selling? Are we looking to kind of go, oh, in fact, I'll invest into this, it's so worth it. I will sacrifice other things because this is so much more worth it. Which does lead, I think, to our third point, which would be forsaking all others. And maybe it's because I've just been attending a lot of weddings and being able to officiate weddings and things like that this month, 3 weddings this month and all. So forsaking all others, till death do you part, kind of thing like that. We get this kind of thing. But the reality is that Jesus is looking for loyalty and total buy-in when it comes to his kingdom. And the problem is that we can look at what's on the table, a chance to be a part of the kingdom of God, a kingdom of heaven. We can see that on the table. We can go, wow, that's pretty interesting to be able to be a part of that. Yeah, I'll take that, please. And also, would you mind throwing in a couple of the waffle fries and the milkshake, and don't forget that Chick-fil-A sauce, because I need that too. It's been a while since I've made y'all crave Chick-fil-A on a Sunday, so just wanted to do that. You're welcome. But the reality is we can sometimes approach the kingdom of heaven like, yeah, I want that, and then also a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We can be tempted into thinking that the kingdom of heaven, like whatever Jesus is building, whatever he's told us that he's building and he's establishing, is a really cool thing to add on to my life. Because, I could really use that as well in my life. I've got some, passions and some hobbies and some visions and goals for my life. And I also think it'd be nice to maybe have God come alongside and just every so often wave his wand and bless what I'm doing and bless what I want so that I can kind of feel good about it. And I know that almost sounds like I'm preaching at you, but I'm just preaching with you. It's just easy for us to have mistresses. Yeah. To go ahead and say, oh, yeah, I like you, but not forsaking all others. Right. We want to be in, but we're not like all in. Right. We want to offer it to God, but we're kind of like, see, I couldn't think of a better example. So I asked Steph and Dustin Gray, who they're back with our kids actually today in our 2 different kids' classrooms. Today we have 2 different kids' classrooms. We're expanding our kids' ministry. Ayo. Really excited about that. Really excited to continue to expand those classrooms for more and more families to enjoy being at a live church and for kids to be ministered to, not just no childcare. We offer kids ministry. But anyway. But they're one of their beautiful kids, Nori. I think she's 2, right? She's 2? Oh, she's a delight. So she's got this wonderful habit where she will have a bunch of, let's say, blocks of multiple colors, because that's how, you tracking with me? Yeah. Okay. And then she'll say, hey, which one do you want? She freely offers. She just out of the blue will just go, Andrew, which one do you want? And Andrew might say, what color would you want? Purple. Her response, you can't. That one's mine. And then she offers again, which color do you want? Here's the thing I found. Every single color that's there that I say has the same response. You can't. That one's mine. I haven't cracked the code of what she's actually getting at. She wants to be generous, but she's not quite there. It reminds me a lot of how some of us go with Jesus. Which one do you want? I want the blue one. Oh, you can't have that. That's my money. You can't. No, your kingdom come everywhere else, but the money is my kingdom. Thank you very much. Okay, which one do you want? I want the yellow one. Oh no, see that's my relationships, and that's kind of off limits. I want to kind of determine what that's going to look like. Okay, which one do you want? Okay, I'll take the purple, or we already did purple. What other color? Green. A green one. Well, that's my job and my vision for my life and the direction it's going in. You can say what you want about everything else. We can sometimes play the game where it's like, which one do you want? And he says, I want that one. And we go, you can't. That one's mine. And it's actually scary, since I've already felt a little bit intense this morning. I'm gonna not shy away from some of the intense things Jesus says. Because Jesus, when he says all in, he means it in a way that's kind of nuts. Y'all ready? Yeah. All right, Luke 14:25. Great crowds accompany Jesus. So he's got all the crowds. It's a mega church moment going on. And he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Which I've been starting with my in-laws, but I'm working on my own. I'm just kidding. They're in the house, so anyway. But anyway, he goes on and says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you desiring to, now he's going to use some more pictures here. Which one of you desiring to build a tower doesn't first sit down and count the cost, whether you actually have enough to complete it? And otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone's going to look at you and mock you and say, this man began to build but was not able to finish. Or what king? He's going to use another picture now. What king going out to encounter another king in war doesn't sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Okay, this is serious. Can I actually do this? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Wow. Yeah, I'll unpack it in just a second. Yeah. But I actually want to make things worse, because that's not even all that Jesus says when it comes to intense. So let's just rip the Band-Aid the rest of the way off. Mark 8:34-37. And calling the crowd to him with his disciples. It seems like Jesus loved to do this in moments where there's a crowd. He's really trying to help the crowd understand, I know you like free food because I'm feeding you, and you like some good stories, but I want to tell you what these stories are pointing to. So he says to them, if anyone would come after me, which, by the way, is still an invitation. He wants them to. Let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for a soul? Such a classic line. For what can a man give? What does it gain to gain the whole world and yet lose your soul? So he's talking about kings counting the cost of battles. He's talking about builders projecting building costs and doing that before you start the building. He's talking about disciples carrying crosses. And all of this is about evaluating the worth and the cost of something and then forsaking all others because of it. Jesus is basically going, what could you really see as more valuable than your soul's satisfaction? Jesus is going, what really, at the end of the day, is worth more than your soul finding the fulfillment for what it was designed for? At the end of the day, if you really get that that's what's at stake here, wouldn't that be worth anything and everything else? So it goes with what Jesus was saying about family. Just to be clear, Jesus is speaking prophetically, which means he's not necessarily speaking literally in the way of hating, as in gosh, I can't stand my family. Which for some of us, we were I'm already obeying the Lord and didn't even know it. But that's not what he's getting at. He's saying, here, listen, your own life, brothers and sisters, family, father, if you, in comparison, it doesn't almost seem like you hate them for how much you love me, then you haven't quite got it. It almost needs to seem like you really couldn't care about anything else in this world more than Jesus for you to then have all those other cares and concerns properly aligned. You will actually love your family best, which Jesus talks about honoring your father and your mother. So again, you look at the whole of what Jesus teaches. He wants you to care for your family. In the New Testament, it even talks about how terrible it is if a church is helping the needs of the poor and those who are destitute, which is a thing we're supposed to be doing, but in doing it and enabling people to go ahead and not care for their own families. So Jesus cares that you care for your family, but what he's saying here is he's going, I need you to get how much your love for me needs to be amped up. The value and the worth needs to be so amped up for you to be a true disciple of mine, which is potentially a hard pill to swallow. Because there is something in us that makes it hard to sometimes prioritize Jesus and his kingdom. Because it's sorry, Jesus, but on this one, I gotta kind of let you take the backseat on this one. This is more my prerogative right here. This is my issue. This is my area where I want to go ahead and say something. But what if we realize that, like Jesus said, it's all in exchange for our souls? Would we rather be the person walking out of the Tucson gem and mineral sale with $10 more? Or with a stone that is valued at least in the tens of thousands? We want to go ahead and say, you know what, whatever I gave up for it, it was worth it. And quite frankly, friends, some of us have been making some bad trades. That's what I felt like I came here on mission to go ahead and share lovingly, not condemningly, but lovingly, that some of us have been making some bad trades. We've been playing games where it's I want to follow Jesus, maybe is what we're even saying, but we're kind of quarantining off areas of our lives. We're playing the game of Jesus goes, okay, I want this part of your life. No, you can't have that one. That one's mine. Pick again. And Jesus is saying, well, here's the thing you don't realize. Every single thing that you're investing into buying this field isn't worth near as much as what's hidden in this field. Every little thing that you're selling to get this pearl is worth it because this pearl is that awesome. The kingdom of heaven is that great. When we realize that, we're willing to sell it out. How many of you, real quickly before I do the illustration, would be willing to give me $100? Just kind of checking. Okay, I didn't think so. Madeline says yes, but she knows she's going to get it back tenfold. But $100 is not the most, but it's a lot. If I were to hand this to you today, you'd be happy. And I want you to know, don't worry, I'm not. It's not one of those Sundays. We've done that before here at Alive, and you just got to come on the right Sunday. It's not one of those Sundays. But speaking of things that are worth something, I've got 3 bags. And what if I were to tell you, those in the back, 3 bags, okay? Behind one of these doors, if I were to tell you, is $100,000. One of those is filled with $100,000 of cash. If I were to say, It's the one the water bottle fell on. Yes. If I were to tell you that, hey, one of these has it. Before this, if I were to tell you that I wanted $10 per bag, you might not have bought them. They're pretty ratty bags. Like this one is my travel bag right now, and I'm losing things at the bottom of it. This one's been around since, Madeline, you were like, what, 12? 6, she says. So, yeah, they're not the most. So if I were to say, like, I want $100 for each of those bags, most of you would have said, absolutely not. Until, if you believe me, which, again, I'm being honest with you as a church, this is a metaphor. I could not get $100,000 liquidated this quickly. I don't have it. Anyway, if I were to tell you that $100,000 was in one of these bags, and if somebody would just give me $100 for each of those bags, you can't look at them before, but you can get them all for $300, you would take the deal. Yes. You tracking with me? Because even though $300, you weren't willing to give me even $100 a minute ago, if you believe truly that there's $100,000 somewhere in here, you're going to buy all 3 bags because it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, Jesus goes, you know what? Sometimes it's hidden. Sometimes the kingdom of heaven isn't as obvious. Sometimes the sacrifice isn't as immediately like, goosebumps. Oh, man, I served on Serve Day, and it was just goosebumps. No, this past one, you got soaking wet, depending on which project you were at. And you might have gotten sick from it. Thanks, Alive Church. Oh my gosh, I've been faithfully giving to the church, and it's doing everything I want it to do. And it's just like, no, maybe not. Maybe it's not all that you dreamed it would be, or I'm sacrificing in this area of my life where I really want my kingdom come in relationships and how I'm going to handle my relational life, and I've been sacrificing and doing what God wants, and I'm not feeling awesome about it. Jesus is going, it's maybe sometimes hidden, but I promise you it's there. Yeah. I promise you it's there. The kingdom of heaven is worth anything on earth. Yeah. On August 27th, 1727, a prayer meeting was started in Herrnhut, Germany, by a guy named Count Zinzendorf. He had profound love for Jesus that drove him personally to prayer. And his concern for what he saw in around him was a powerless church. He saw the answer, a prayerful people. And so Count Zinzendorf, back in 1727, he decided, you know what, let's just start praying. And this movement became actually the Moravian Church. What they did is they just started taking slots. It was like a 300-member church, and they started taking slots of, let's pray 24/7. I don't know who was taking the 2 a.m. one, but somebody was taking a 2 a.m. slot to go ahead and start praying. And as they're praying, people are just crying out to God. And sometimes I'm sure there were moments where it was like, oh my gosh, prayers are being answered. I just feel the presence of God. This is awesome. The kingdom of heaven, I could feel like I could almost touch it. It's like right here. And then I'm willing to bet, just so you all know, in case you felt like you're unspiritual, because sometimes you pray and you don't feel anything, I bet you any money that I have that there were moments where they prayed for a full hour in the middle of the morning, and they were like, I almost fell asleep. That was really tiring. Didn't feel any goosebumps. Just felt myself nodding off. And there didn't seem to be any results in it. But you know what? They started praying. And during this time, at some point, Zinzendorf, he goes to a museum, an art museum, and he sees this one art piece where it pictures Jesus with a crown of thorns on his head. And the blood's like coming down his face. It's pretty intense. And underneath the portrait, it's written these words, I have done this for you. What have you done for me? And that stuck with him. Not in a guilt way, not in a guilt-ridden of like, I've done this for you, what have you done for me? But like, I have done this for you, what have you done for me? So out of their prayer movements became stirred this desire to make Jesus known among all the people groups of the world. To know that there are people groups in the world that had never heard the gospel. The Moravians, Count Zinzendorf and his church and his friends, they were like, you know what, this God and his kingdom needs to go everywhere. It needs to be spread. And there was there's this in the Bible, this picture of Jesus as the lamb. And they believed that the lamb that was sacrificed deserved to go ahead and be known to all mankind. And they recognized what Jesus had done for them was so much that they wanted to, not guilted to, wanted to do something in return. He's made it all available. What are we going to do? So 5 years into that 24/7 prayer movement, 2 of their church members, tradesmen by trade, so they were tradesmen. They went out to the slave yard and they said, hey, sign us up. They actually got laughed out. They got laughed out of because the white people were saying, we don't sell white people as slaves. And so they had to go ahead and say, well, then just whatever we can do as indentured servants, we'll go. We'll sell all we have. We're going to leave and do all we have. And so the slave traders are just like, okay, we'll take your money. We'll ship you out. And the reason why is because they had heard about in St. Thomas in the Caribbean, there were a lot of African slaves that were being transported over there, obviously, awfully. And yet these people were thirsty and hungry for the gospel, and there wasn't somebody there to present the true gospel to them and disciple them. And so these guys were like, listen, those are our brothers and sisters over there. So we'll sacrifice everything. This Jesus is worth it. So David and Johann determined by any means to help, even if that meant joining them, selling themselves to the gospel entirely. And so they traveled, and they went there. And then as the story ends in dramatic fashion, they're there on the boat looking at this dock of people that are strangers and loved ones. As they're looking at this dock that represents everything that they owned, that they valued, everything that was worth anything in their lives, that they're actually saying, I'm probably never going to see this again, never going to see you again. It's a dramatic moment. And as they're standing there on the ship looking out, David and Johann, they cry out, may the lamb that was slain receive the reward of his suffering. May the lamb that was slain, that lamb that sacrificed his life for me, receive the reward of his suffering. My friends, what is Jesus worth receiving from you in your life? What is Jesus worth him looking and pointing at and you saying, absolutely? Absolutely. What maybe sacrifice in any way of our lives has Jesus not earned? And if he asks for it, what do we gain by keeping the world and any bit and piece of it if we're looking at Jesus and saying, no? Jesus told us, he's saying, no, you don't gain anything. In fact, the greatest gain is that I will say, come into the kingdom, and you can be a part of what I'm doing, Jesus says. So when we get the value of that invitation, that kingdom, we live differently because we value differently, right? We pray differently. We pursue differently. We prioritize differently. We sacrifice differently. We sell differently. We buy differently. We devote ourselves differently. We don't want to be like Jesus' one parable a couple weeks ago. The seed that grew up and looked really good until the thorns of the deceitfulness of wealth and the comfort of this world choked out the good thing that God was looking to do. So we say, Jesus, trim back the thorns. In our lives this morning, that's simply what I want us to do, is to say, you know what? I don't want to allow anything that's good to keep me from the greatest good. The kingdom of heaven is worth anything on this earth. And many martyrs over the course of history have known that Jesus promises in Matthew 5, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Anything we sacrifice is worth it.